And I'm sitting there thanking my stars that I'm not on the midnight shift. I've got a stack of burglary reports on one corner of my desk and a stack of pawn shop tickets on the other corner. Yes, it's better than graveyards. And the sergeant comes by and he says, "Hey, does anybody want to go work in the divert unit?" I didn't even know what it was. I'd never had an opportunity to interact with them in patrol. So I'm like, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "Well, it's this kind of touchy-feely bunch of people. They work downtown here. You'll be off-site, victim advocate types, things like that. You can do it for a couple of years. Can't make a career out of it. But all they do is domestic violence cases." And I raised my hand. I was the only one to raise their hand. And that's happened to me several times in my career, sometimes to my own detriment. But this turned out to be a pretty good thing. I got to go work with this team that was funded by VAWA. If you all remember VAWA, there was a lot of money back then. This was in the late 90s up to the first 2000. And so we had funding to pay for our building, for overtime for the officers that were assigned there. There was 3 full-time detectives. Colorado Springs PD had a patrol officer that every 90 days would come in and rotate out, and a new guy or new gal would come in, and we'd educate them on our program. We had nonprofit victim advocates that were seconded to our team. We had a full-time prosecutor. We had multiple levels of cases. Our most high risk of lethality cases were hazarded in the database on our computer. So if you're dispatched to a house, you would know before going there that it's a divert client. If it's a DV call and you get on scene, we'll come out and take over the case. They did a study that showed it reduced recidivism. It was an international demonstration site. We had people coming from around the world, not just in the US, to see our program. I got to travel around the US quite a bit, see other people's programs. But if you go on Google today and try to look up Colorado Springs Divert, it's not there. You can find some documents about the history of it and some of the studies that were done, but it doesn't exist anymore because the funding went away. And all of the partner organizations who were patting ourselves on the back going, "This is such a great program, we're doing such a good," what? There's no more money? Oh, well, we'll just pull everybody back. And I tell you this story because domestic violence is not a police problem. It's not an advocacy problem. It's not a prosecutorial problem. It is a community problem. And we've got to look at it through that lens, through a multidisciplinary approach. All of those people that made up our team, the advocates, the prosecutors, the cops that really work these cases to the full extent, they're all in your community. Every one of you have those people. You are those people. But we've got to identify each other, right? So we come to trainings like this. We join coordinated community response teams. We network, maybe informally, but having a cup of coffee or sharing stories about our trials and tribulations of this work is so important, because we've got to be able to come to the table and tackle this from a community-centered approach. So I stayed with that team for almost 2 years, and then I got an opportunity to go overseas. If you remember, back in the late 90s or early 2000s, there was a war in the former Yugoslavia, and I came to work one day. On the bulletin board, there was a post from the sheriff. It said, "The State Department is recruiting for American police officers to go to Kosovo with be seconded to the United Nations Police. If you apply and get accepted, we'll give you a 1-year leave of absence." And I was like, I'm going through a divorce, right? How many cops do you know have been divorced? A lot of them. Over half of them, maybe as high as 70% of them. That was me. So I'm thinking, I can't get much further away than Kosovo. I filled out an application, and literally within about 30 days, no less than that, I was in training in Virginia. I went overseas, and again, I took what I had learned from the divert team in Colorado. I took it with me. I became the coordinator, the chief of the domestic violence program for the whole country under the United Nations. It was a great experience for me, and I tell you that part of the story because I got to travel around the Balkans. I got to go to Armenia. I got to go to Albania, Macedonia. Domestic violence is the same no matter where you go. The dynamics are the same. There may be some cultural differences that are significant in some places, but the core of it, the power and control mechanisms, that the coercive control that abusers implement, it spans all across the world. Every economic group, every socioeconomic group, cultural groups, it's pretty much the same. I eventually made my way back to the United States. I went to work for a federal law enforcement training center as an instructor there. And again, focusing on domestic violence. And so my sergeant's statement about you can't make a career out of this, I kind of did. For about the last 20 years, that's pretty much what I've been focusing on, at least as a significant sideline of what I do in this work. Went back overseas for another 4 years and came back. Now I've been with the Eddy County Sheriff's Office now for almost 15 years. Started a patrol, worked my way up to captain. Most of that's been in the detective division. So that's enough about me. I want to learn about you all. So what disciplines have we got here in the room today? Who are my victim advocates? Very good. And are you with a nonprofit? Where are you from? Okay, Firming Heart. And we work really, the Eddy County Sheriff's Office works very closely with the Firming Heart. I'll tell you more about that. Who else? What other advocates do I have? Yes, ma'am. Where are you from? Phoenix House. Okay, Phoenix House, right here. Good. What other disciplines do I have? Do I have any prosecutors in the room? No. Oh, good. We can talk bad about them. How many police officers do I have? Law enforcement do I have? 1, 2, 3. Very. I'm impressed you're sitting in the front row. That almost never happens. Cops are always in the very back, gossiping. We gossip about everything. So you're state police. Where are you signed? Here in Hobbs. Okay, great. And Don, tell them about yourself real quick. Don is our supervisor of our domestic violence enhanced response team.
I'm Don Norton, part of the divert team, domestic violence enhanced response team. It's a program that the captain came to me 2 years ago and said, I have this program that I want to run. Does anybody want to do it? I was the only one that raised my hand. He and I share a lot of the same stories. But domestic violence is, I'm not a product of domestic violence when I grew up, but I am a product of it now after 20 years of a tumultuous relationship. And so it's near and dear to my heart. It's something that we do. We work out of a Firming Heart, which is kind of cool because it's not something that we see throughout New Mexico. We don't see it throughout the U.S. I recently reached out to my sergeant out of Honolulu, Hawaii. That's how far we're starting to get spread out. We do. So I'm going to take my friend with me. So, but we're starting to make a name for ourselves because we're getting out there, doing conferences, getting out and seeing it, but seeing what works. When I started with the program, I told the captain I wanted our conviction rate to go from 3% to 5% conviction rate. He said, you're going to become more of an advocate than you are going to be a law enforcement. Yeah, right, whatever. I now wear ballerina shoes. That's the joke that we have. And I am more of an advocate. I love what I do. But I also found out that a conviction rate isn't what we needed. What we needed was a recidivism rate. What can we reduce that? Can we give our survivors resources that they need in order to keep it so that they're not going through the system over and over and over? We tell our patrol guys all the time, this isn't just, you want a sexy case, get a domestic violence case, and you're going to get sexual assault out of it. You're going to get things, if you just look outside it, you're going to find felonies in almost every domestic violence case you work. You will find something that goes with it. And we tell them this is truly homicide prevention. So by the time we work a case, and you work it right, and you work with your advocates, you're going to find more and more when you do a lethality assessment, how close our survivors are getting to dying. And we worked it, being in our office, we sit in there on a who's one of my advocates, Vanessa, my other advocate, will come in and tell me, hey, somebody wants to come talk to you. They'll come talk to us and disclose years of abuse that's been happening, and we're able to work some pretty amazing cases and get people's help, and that's what we need to do. So we're here for it. We would love to talk to any agency that is thinking about doing a domestic violence unit, because it is one thing that's absolutely needed in every community that we work in.
Thanks very much. How about counselors, therapists? Great, very good. You look familiar. Where are you from? Yes. Okay. Okay, very good. Thanks for being here. What else? Who did I miss? What other disciplines? Yes, ma'am. CASA. Very good. Thank you. Wonderful. Yes. Okay. CYFD. Wonderful. Because we're going to talk a lot about you guys today and the importance of not in a negative way, just in a way of we've got to share information a lot more than we do. Okay, good. Well, this is a safe place. If you want to yell at the cops or yell about the cops, please do so. And I saw another hand. What other nurses? Yes, I forgot. My wife's a nurse. Yes, nurses. Any more nurses? We got and where's Angela? Oh, there you are. There you go. Sex assault nurse examiner. Okay, good deal. So my next question to you is, please let it all out. What are your frustrations about domestic violence cases? What is the thing that just sticks in your craw the most? And you're not going to hurt anybody's feelings, especially the police officers, because we all know it's true. But tell me, let me see some hands. What just really bugs you? You can't. Yes, ma'am, right here.
I want to say I understand like it's like for evidence reasons that it has to go off people and they need that evidence, but to the point it's just like when does it become unsafe? When do people like, hey, this is probably too far? When you have, even if it's just a little bit of evidence we need to put this person in a safer place, in a safer environment.
Okay.
Because it could just be a lot of, because like whenever you hear it, there people would say, no, this is what he said, she said. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Say that factual evidence.
Yes.
And it's so hard.
You're saying it's hard to gather that evidence, or it's hard to
just to stand by there and just like wait, because this is
okay. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a lot about exploring those patterns in these relationships, because we, in my view, my humble opinion, we've got to stop looking at domestic violence as incident-based crime. It's not a one-time event, and if we're not capturing the whole picture, we're not going to be effective with prosecution, helping people out, getting them to the proper resources. You name it, we're going to miss it if we just look at. So you got a black eye there. Tell me, how'd you get that black eye? And you're telling, oh, my husband punched me. Okay, good. So he's going to go to jail. Here's a brochure. If something else, here's some resources in the community. Happens again, call 911. Thanks very much, and I go about my way, right? And I miss so many opportunities to explore what's beyond that one incident. I've got to be asking questions about those patterns. Well, tell me about your relationship. When did the violence first start to manifest? And you ask questions about coercive controlling behavior, right? And this is all evidence. This is all stuff that we can use in those cases if we're asking. We've got to be doing lethality assessments. We'll talk more on that. So looking beyond and asking survivors, how did that make you feel, right? I want to know, how did it affect you psychologically? And I can document that in my report. It's going to be on my body cam video, right? And so we have questions. Lethality assessments are a great tool for that, about how did you feel when that was occurring. If you're asking about strangulation, for example, well, he was strangling me and I thought I was going to die. Those are powerful statements, right? That I can get into court. So yeah, I appreciate that. What else? Here, give me some other. Yes, ma'am.
when there's children in the home of the domestic violence family, that they were overlooked.
Yeah, 100%. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at police reports from my agency where an officer might even mention, oh, there was kids present, right? But they're not documented in the report anywhere. I don't know their name. I don't know their birthday. I don't know what school they go to. I don't know how tall they are, how much they weigh, what color their eyes. All of those boxes we have on police reports, you got to fill them out. Why? Well, because CYFD needs that stuff, right? You're going to go out and contact that family because you're part of this process, this multidisciplinary team. But if they don't have the basic information to follow up on, what do? It's so frustrating. I hear that over and over again. Give me another example. Yes, ma'am.
When there is domestic violence, but because there's no markings at that moment, there's no arrest for the person that's not made to lethal.
Okay. No physical signs of injury. Yes, and no arrest, or maybe even worse, there is an arrest and they're not gathering the evidence to make sure that's ever going to go anywhere in the court system. Yes. Other, yes, ma'am.
And I don't necessarily not from cops, but just people who don't know when they're just, why doesn't she just leave? She just leaves. She has other people in town. She just leaves. But it's totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish it was that simple, but I mean,
Right.
especially because when we get people that one spouse is undocumented, there's a lot of well, if she leaves me, I'm going to turn her in or stuff like that.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of reasons. If it was just as simple as just leaving, they
Right.
would.
It's a significant lack of training and education for police officers across the board. What we get in our basic academy, I don't know about state police, but it's probably not a whole lot different than the regular state academy. It's not much. It's a few hours out of the, you spend way more time shooting at paper targets than you do learning about how to protect people in a domestic violence call. Most of it tends to be on the job stuff that we learn. And it may be good and it may be bad. I can tell you, I have said that to people in my career. Why don't you just leave? And I've thought it a lot more times because I didn't know. I didn't understand the dynamics. I can remember going to calls in Alamogordo. We had the DPS system, right? So there's a structure fire. Everybody's fighting the fire except me. I'm the only guy. So I'm going to that call, domestic violence call, by myself, which is a big no-no. It's hard with state police, right? You're really rural areas. You're the only person out there. How are you going to get somebody to back you up? And we've got to be creative about that because we should not be going to those calls alone. You can't do an effective investigation. You can't separate people. You can't talk to them in a private, any kind of a private conversation. You're not safe as an officer there by yourself. These are volatile, dangerous calls many times. So yeah, that's a great point. What else? Any other? Yes, sir.
Treating survivors as evidence instead of as human beings.
Can you give me an example? Or,
you know, being unempathetic to them and, you know, saying, well, you need to show up in court, you need to do this, you need to do that. When there's so many other ways our judicial system can do victimless prosecutions and everything else, and putting them through that, re-traumatizing them, re-victimizing them over and over and over again for a year-long process that we don't, you know, we're not taking into account what that survivor's role.
great. Very good. Other issues? Yes, back in the back.
The amount of disproportionate burden that's put on the survivor to kind of make the case, to make everything happen so that there's some type of result or accountability, right?
Right.
Now, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
When looking at kind of offender rap sheets, right? If you're looking at your helping survivors and you see that the offender has, let's say a rap sheet that goes back 20 years, right? In increments of 2-3 years, the battery of housing,
Yeah.
kind of indicative of maybe multiple relationships where it's just kind of continued to happen, same patterns. But I can't think of any other alleged crime or not where there would be just dismissal after dismissal after dismissal after dismissal.
Right.
Without someone saying, hey, this is more than just up to the survivor to step up and press charges and follow through with every burdensome step that they have to. And look at it like you just said, a community problem. Like, hey, what's up with this individual who just continues to do this action to harm others and it continues to be dismissed? I'm not even traffic tickets get dismissed like that often,
Yeah.
you know? And that,
The last time that I'm aware of that any definitive study was done in New Mexico on the statistics around successful prosecution on domestic violence and sexual assault cases was from 2016. But if you heard Don mention, I want to raise our prosecution rate from, would you say 3% to 6%? Does it surprise any of you that that is about, you're in the single digits on successful prosecutions every county in this state? It's abysmal. If you were a victim and you went in going, that's the odds that this is going to go anywhere, why would I even talk to you? Why would I want to move forward on this? And of course, you'll get a lot of people saying, well, it's all because of the victim, right? She becomes uncooperative. She's not participating any longer. Well, let's stop looking at her about that and start looking at him. Why has she become uncooperative? What kind of fear has been instilled in her to put her in a position where she's not willing to come and participate in this process any longer. We've got to retrain our focus and stop looking at victims as the problem. Because I tell you, to your point, prosecutors across the state will tell you, I don't have a choice but to dismiss these cases because all I have is a 2-paragraph police report, maybe a couple of photographs, and a statement from the victim, and a statement from the suspect, maybe, and that's it. That's all I got. That's probable cause. Yes, it's a very easy standard to meet, to make that arrest, but you're not going anywhere. You've got to be looking at this proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Police officers have to be looking at it through that lens from the very beginning and making the assumption at the beginning that this person, your survivor, isn't going to be there for court. Yes.
The composition of our legislature and the laws.
Okay. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So I don't know exact numbers, but a lot of the legislature is made up of defense bar, and the laws have been watching them for years. They get lesser and lesser and lesser every year.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Okay. I'm going to tell you, one of the things we're going to do as a group a little bit later is I'm going to talk about a case that I worked several years ago that I made a lot of mistakes on. But it's a pretty interesting story, but I'm going to need you guys to give me some feedback on how I might have been able to have done better and how we might be able to do better going forward. But it's kind of a classic, if there is such a term, classic domestic violence case that I worked, that I was so proud of myself because I made an arrest and some things that happened with the victim later on. But looking back at it now, all these years later, I realized there was so many things that I missed. I have to turn this on. Where's my AV person? It's lighting up and nothing's happening. There we go. Oh, that's our patch, by the way. Thanks to me and ChatGPT, we created that. It came out pretty good. That's what's on our Divert team uniforms. And by the way, for law enforcement officers or aspiring law enforcement officers, we currently have a vacancy in the Divert team, and we will hire you from outside to come and be assigned to our specialized unit if you're interested in working domestic violence cases on a regular. Okay. So we got to understand, right? It's a pattern. Domestic violence is a pattern of behavior and coercive behavior that we're trying to control an intimate partner, just so we're all on the same page about what we're talking about with that terminology. It can be sexual abuse, it can be psychological abuse, verbal abuse. It can also be child abuse. And I would submit to you, because this is kind of the theme, right? What's the intersection of child abuse and domestic violence? Someone mentioned that about how we're missing that so much. We get on the scene and we're like, are there kids here? Yeah. But they didn't, mom and dad are like, well, yep, they were upstairs. They were outside. They didn't hear anything. They didn't see anything. They're growing up in a violent home. We've got to be including them in our reports. We've got to be doing those forensic interviews, getting statements from these kids if it's appropriate. We have to be doing those CYFD referrals, those SCI referrals. Otherwise, we're not looking at it from a multidisciplinary approach. So placing a child in a situation that may endanger their life or health, that's what we're talking about with child abuse. If you're in a violent home, may that endanger your health, your psychological health, your physical health? It also includes torturing, cruelly confining, or cruelly punishing a child. We're not always going to get to that level, for sure, but we got to look beyond that. We've got to look at mental states, the intentional, knowing, negligent, reckless endangerment of a child. The key point is that you don't have to have an actual injury. Endangerment alone, under our state law, meets the threshold of child abuse. I met one of my mentors is a retired police chief from Indiana. She was a police chief for, I think, about half a decade, maybe a little longer. I met her, I got to meet her in person recently at the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference in Denver. And we were talking, and she said, I said, you know, I can retire. And I'd like to keep doing this kind of training like you do. She's retired, and that's all she does. Travels all over the country and the world teaching on sexual assault and domestic violence. She goes, well, just do it. She said, you can say things to people that I can't say. Even though I was in law enforcement for 25 years, I retired as a chief. If I get up in front of a group of cops and tell them domestic violence is a men's problem, I'm automatically a man hater, right? Yep, I just can't get away. But you can say it. And I'm saying it to you all right now. Domestic violence is a men's problem. And we have to own that as men. We have to own that as police officers and understand our role in the community and how powerful it is and how we can really institute change within our organizations, within our communities, if we set the standard for being affirming, non-abusive individuals. Men overwhelmingly commit and condone much of the violence. We often do it just through silence. We don't say anything. We hear misogynistic jokes in our ranks, and we don't call it out. We don't want to have attention put on us for speaking up, but we've got to be part of the solution to shift those attitudes. Men use violence in a much different way than women do. And it's important to understand that. Again, if we're not building those patterns, if we don't understand the dynamics of the relationship of violence, and we're looking at that one incident where maybe she used violence and it doesn't seem like self-defense, but maybe it really is. If we're not building getting those facts from our victims, understanding that research consistently shows that women's use of violence is more often reactive. It's more often in self-defense. And maybe something is, yeah, I punched him because he backed me into a corner. And the last time he did that, he punched me. So it was a retaliatory strike. I took him out before he could take me out. But if we don't get that conversation going, we're never going to know. It's more often women using violence as a response to prolonged coercive control, where men, on the other hand, are far more likely to use violence as a means of power and control, intimidation. They're much more likely to use weapons. They're much more likely to inflict serious bodily injury. And there's much more likely to be patterns involved. It's important that we don't lump it all. Sometimes I get detractors who will say, why do you have to make it gender specific? Because I think if we lump it all into one basket, like it's just generic, right? It's just domestic violence. We run this trying to get this gender neutral framework. We risk serious misunderstandings, and we end up misidentifying victims as offenders. Firearms. Just having a gun in your home increases your risk of lethality 500%. It's significant. And it doesn't, the statistics show that and I've seen police officers time and again advise victims, well, go get a gun, protect yourself. But are we really ready to defend ourselves with a firearm? Are we really ready to bring that weapon into the home and do what it takes to make sure that it's kept in a safe place, that it's secured, that it's locked, and that the offender's not going to get a hold of it? But even if it's the offender's weapon, he doesn't have to shoot you with it. It's just him having that gun being present changes the dynamics of everything that's happening with that coercive control. Just the threat that it exists, and it's significant. So we've got to be sure that we're asking questions about guns. If I get called to the scene and it's a verbal disagreement, why am I not asking, do you have guns? Because it increases your risk 500%, right? I want to know that. We need those lethality assessment tools, which I'll show you the one we use in a minute, that asks, does he have access to a firearm, or can he easily get one? Because that increases your risk dramatically. So asking those lethality questions are imperative. Having a firearm in the home is the strongest predictor of a future homicide. That along with strangulation. Some interesting stats on children. 1 in 15 children are exposed to domestic violence each year, and 90% are eyewitnesses to the abuse. I tell you, the reports that I review, you would think they're almost never exposed to violence. They're not even mentioned in the reports often, unless they were directly injured by something, or they were maybe very close proximity to the violence that was going on, or they were in a car and someone was driving it drunk. Things like that, they'll pop up. But just because they're a member of that family, rarely do they get identified. I'm saying that we've got to do that, and we've got to be making referrals, Sky referrals, on all of those cases, because that family needs assistance that, as a police officer, I'm not going to be able to provide that. That community approach is imperative. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the United States have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. So we know it happens on a regular basis. If you look at children under age 13, where 23% of murder victims killed by a family member and just over 3% of non-family murder victims. The average age among sons and daughters killed by a parent was 7 years old. And 4 out of 5 victims killed by a parent were under the age of 13. You all are going to have clients who have kids, of course. We all know that, right? So that's why this is so important. You have to understand it. We can't keep it behind closed doors. Children see it and they hear it, and we've got to offer the resources to them. We've got to be documenting them in our reports. And you may be the first line of support for these kids, even if they're not dealing with law enforcement. First off, they're coming into your job, your center. You may be the only opportunity for that kid to be in a safe place and disclose what's going on. They may not tell anybody else. The numbers are staggering because DV is significantly underreported, right? We know that, it's still a thing. And we know that the statistics on strangulation, the statistics on firearms, all of this stuff is so underreported. But the research is clear. We know that it impacts brain development of kids growing up in violent, coercive, controlling homes. It affects their mental health, long-term outcomes. And we've got to turn this information into knowledge so we can actually make a difference in these families. But we've got to identify those kids to start it all off. This is a friend of mine. She does a podcast out of Colorado that I appeared on, and I asked her to help me out here. This is what she does full time, dealing with children and growing up in violent homes. There's some things that she highlighted that you may see, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with some of you all, but separation type anxiety with kids, a lot of guilt, a lot of denial, apathy, and you're going to see that as a law enforcement officer as well if you're listening to what kids are saying. Increased aggression, increased need for power and control from children. You may see it in their reenactments in their play. Anger towards the victim parent. You can see post-traumatic stress disorder for sure in children. And coaching on specific events where they're being coached by people in the family to say what they want them to say in interviews. And I know my colleague from Hobbs back here will, please, for you law enforcement in the room, stop interviewing kids at the scene. We've got to get past that. This is a specialized skill that you have to have significant training on to make sure we're not going to make the situation worse for these kids. I want to know the child's name. I want to know what school they go to, their height, their weight, all of that stuff. And I want to capture those things that they say on my body cam video and put them in the narrative of my report. But I don't want to be seeing officers saying, well, tell me, little Johnny, what happened here today? Did you see mom hit dad, or did you see dad hit? Stop. No, we don't need that. We've got to get them in for those forensic interviews. And I understand, particularly for a patrol, that's tough, right? Because, well, how am I going to make that happen? You're going to need help, right? You really need that community approach, that multidisciplinary approach. If you're in a really small rural community and it's just you, then you got to have the phone numbers to call Affirming Heart or Phoenix House and say, hey, can you help me set up this forensic interview? But most little bit larger agencies, if you have a detective division, they need to step up and be part of that process, getting those forensic interviews scheduled and handled for you. You're working the midnight shift, it's virtually impossible to do that on your own. How might our parents present from you in a therapeutic setting? They may appear anxious, detached, depressed, fearful of what might happen, what's going to happen with my kids. Are they going to be taken away? Appearing overly needy or very chaotic. That's we're talking about victim parents, right? And for the abusive parent, they may not even show up. They may be really absent in this whole process, or the opposite, overly involved. Got to be in control of everything that's being said and controlling the narrative here. Overly flattering, or maybe this Jekyll and Hyde type of personality, or they withdraw from child services completely. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not following any of the parenting plan that's been set up. I'm gonna eject myself from it completely. I'm the king of my castle. You're not coming to my house. You're not telling me how to take care of my family. The problem, as I see it, is we tend to separate child abuse from domestic violence too frequently, because if it's occurring in a family, if that violence is occurring in the family and there's kids there, we've got to be including them in this understanding that it's all part of one problem. And we stop separating DV from child abuse, because the offenders aren't doing that, right? It's all part of the same system for them. If we're doing that, if we're separating it, creates blind spots. We end up building systems that treat DV and child abuse as separate problems. But we can separate that if we start bringing them together as one problem. It matters because children don't have to see violence to be shaped by it. They're continuously living in an environment of fear, control, and unpredictability that changes how they think, how they attach, how they respond to stress, and it kind of becomes their baseline, right? That's what they're experiencing every day. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, we as police officers particularly, we get trained how to investigate incidents. We don't typically get trained on how to look for patterns. Maybe later on in our careers, if you become a homicide detective or in a specialized team, you get some of that. But in the initial stages, that's not often the way we get trained to look at things. We're kind of, yes, just the facts, ma'am. It's still kind of that, anybody remember Joe Friday? Tell me what happened today. I need to see if there's probable cause here. Did a crime occur? Who's my victim? Who's my suspect? Do I have enough to make an arrest? We're only focusing on what's in front of us at that moment. This concept of coercive control, I know in England they've actually passed a law on coercive control. It's a criminal charge now. You can go to prison for being a coercive controlling type, and I don't know that we're ever going to get that here in the United States, but we can definitely be much more educated on how that impacts relationships and how powerful that behavior is to keeping victims from being in a safe environment and understanding how it affects children. They're experiencing this environment constantly. They're adapting to the fear, and they're learning, probably most importantly, what relationships look like. This is what I grew up with. This is what I'm going to be doing as I become an adult. It becomes predictable for them. So when I talk about coercive control, it's the mechanism behind the pattern, right? It's not always physical violence. It's things like isolation, financial control, the monitoring, the threats, the psychological dominance. You can have a high-risk offender with very little injury, very little visible injury in many of these cases. And that's why these incident-based models fail, because they're looking for physical evidence, not the behavioral patterns. And I realize it's frustrating for officers, like, well, I can't arrest anybody for calling his spouse names. I can't arrest them for not giving her money to buy to go to the store, or making all the financial decisions, or looking at her text messages when she doesn't want me to, which I would gather you probably can't arrest for that. We can talk more about that. But it's frustrating, but all of you probably will agree with me that most victims, in my experience, will tell you the most impactful, the most hurtful, the most damaging things that happen to them is not the physical violence. It's this coercive control. It's the psychological abuse. It's the put downs. It's the name calling. It's the constant surveillance. It's the I'm the king of the castle kind of attitude that many of these offenders will have. Its impact on children is substantial. We often, as I said, say kids just witness domestic violence, but that minimizes what's really happening, right? They're living under the same rules that victim is. What can be said, what can't be said, when it's safe to move, when it's safe to speak or even exist. They're not watching the environment, they're surviving it. Again, fear becomes their baseline, and we are the catalyst for helping them get out of that situation if we're identifying that coercive controlling behavior. And this isn't just specific to law enforcement, but when you're talking to a victim of domestic violence and a survivor of domestic violence, you've got to understand the interconnected and co-occurring crimes that go around these cases. Domestic violence, sexual assault, strangulation, stalking, they all overlap, right? They're all interconnected. And these are, I would tell you that most prosecutors, in my experience, will tell you they would prefer to see you stack charges on domestic violence cases. If you have a criminal statute that's been violated, in addition to, say, battery on a household member, he punches her, but he's also breaking furniture, if he's taken her phone, those are two separate crimes. If he's blocked her way from leaving a room, that's another crime. If he's committed any of these acts, understanding that it's a course of conduct, and we've got to be evaluating it as such. So if you're running into witness intimidation, if you have weapons violations, if you have protective order violations, high risk of lethality there if there's protective order violations. If there's child abuse, if there's kids in the home, you have child abuse, right? If there's vandalism, voyeurism, you may have elder abuse going along with these homes as well. Animal abuse is another thing that frequently occurs. The financial crimes. We've got to be documenting all of those, even the ones that we can't necessarily arrest for. It's got to be part of our investigation. I think you heard Don mentioned earlier about we want to investigate these cases like they're potential homicides. Why would we do that? Because 50% of all female homicide victims were killed in connection with intimate partner violence. Half of every victim who's killed. That's a really high statistic, sobering statistic. When I'm teaching groups of investigators, I will say, how many of you ever worked a homicide case? I know Don's worked one. Who else? Anybody else ever worked a homicide case before? How many do you think you've worked in your career? 12. Okay, that's substantial. That's a lot. Have you ever had a victim in one of your homicide cases show up to testify?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So the only time we've ever had something like that is when we get an interview in the hospital, and then it's identified as a dying declaration. They talk about what happened, and then in the next couple hours they pass, and so we can use their recording,
right.
Provide their statement, even though they're deceased.
So they showed up through their evidence, right, that you gathered. They weren't physically there. Right. Right.
The quality of that statement is what we can use, and if it's a crappy statement, we ask crappy questions.
Yeah, excellent. The point being, right, that the victim's not physically there, but we still move forward, and we I mean, you know, out of those 12, how many did you get successful prosecutions?
8, I think.
8, pretty good. That's great. We still get successful prosecutions without victims being present, homicide, all the time, because we gather the evidence, because they record dying declarations, because they take the body cam video and they get the transcript of what was said on that. They make sure all that evidence gets to the prosecution so they can use it as we're moving forward. There's a concept of forfeiture by wrongdoing. It's a legal concept that it's not just New Mexico, it's everywhere in the United States. It's actually originated in England, that it gets far underutilized in my experience in New Mexico. But I'll give you a great example of a victim not being present that I just got to testify on. I testified, this is week before last, in Roswell. And some of you might remember the guy's name, Rico Rivera. He murdered his wife in Roswell, abducted their child, and fled to Mexico. And it made the national news. He was there for quite a while. The FBI got involved. And they extradited him back, and he murdered his wife through strangulation. Brought him back. They tried him. He was found guilty of the murder, second degree, unfortunately. But he's going to be in prison for a long time. Well, about 2 weeks prior to him murdering her, he had strangled her on that occasion as well. Roswell PD came in. They took a report, and they had charges. Pending on him, which he was ultimately arrested for, or charged with, after he was arrested on the murder charge. To the 5th Judicial District Attorney's Office credit, they didn't let it go, right? They went back and prosecuted him for that strangulation that occurred before he murdered her. I got to go in and testify as an expert. My role was pretty simple. I just went in and testified about the dynamics, not the dynamics, the mechanics of strangulation, how it's achieved, what the effects of it are, how lethal it is. The judge would not let a lot of the stuff in that I wanted to talk about, like the power and control dynamics, the 750% greater likelihood you're later going to be murdered if you're strangled. That's exactly what happened in that case, right? He murdered her. But I couldn't talk about that. It was too prejudicial. But I still got to talk about the dangerousness of strangulation. And he was convicted for that as well, without the victim being present. Because everything that she said, the body cam video of the officers, all of the statements that she made in the police reports, was brought in because he used he prevented her from testifying by killing her. But we don't have to go to that extreme. It could just be he convinced her not to testify because, look, sweetheart, I'm going to go to prison if you go in and testify against me. Or I'm getting my family members to go and put pressure on her. You know, this is not right. You can't let him go to jail for this. You got to withdraw from this. You can't show up to testify. Or I've had him where you got to write a letter to the prosecutor telling him you want to drop the charges on this case. All of that stuff is designed to get a victim not to participate. But we've got to gather that evidence, right? The DA is not going to do it for us. That's not their job to investigate these cases. This is their job to prosecute. But in so many of these cases, we can build a case for that forfeiture by wrongdoing. Another investigative actions that increase prosecution and conviction rates. This may sound like common sense to many of you, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of police officers out there that don't do them. Obtain photographs of victims, witnesses, and the scene. We rely so heavily on our body cam video now, which is great, but it doesn't capture everything. And most of them, there are some exceptions, but most of those body cams don't take very good photographs. You can use them for like still photos. There's generally not a viewfinder. Officers aren't using scales to document injuries. You got to take those overall photos. You got to take mid-range close-ups with a scale, without a scale. So getting those photographs, Documenting the witnesses, who was here in the household. Everybody that was present in that household is a witness. The neighbors are potential witnesses. We've got to identify them and we've got to get statements from them. Locate and interview the multiple witnesses and interview the children in the home. And I don't mean you interview them, you set up those forensic interviews. You get the kids interviewed professionally. Obtain an emergency protective order. These are all things that we know statistically are going to increase prosecution and conviction rates. Protect people, oh, it's just a piece of paper, doesn't mean anything. It's a great barometer of how lethal that situation is. If an offender is blatantly violating a protective order, thumbing their nose at the court, at the judge, at the whole system, I don't care what that paper says, I'm not paying attention to it, it's a red flag for us. Locate and arrest and interview the suspect. Might sound like common sense, but it gets missed so often. Let me ask you, what's your first name? Alonzo. Have you ever been to a domestic violence call where you get on scene and the offender is not there, he's fled? Yes. Happens pretty regularly, right? But you're there and you interview the witness, or the victim rather, and you see evidence that a crime has occurred. Maybe she's got some injuries. You document it, you take photographs. You get probable cause, right, to make an arrest for that guy, even though he's fled. And you do your due diligence. Alonzo goes and he does a criminal complaint. He gets it in the system, into NCIC, right? So if another officer comes in contact with that guy, he knows he gets a warrant for his arrest to charge him with that crime. And then Alonzo goes on 3 days off, right? And his partner, who was working when Alonzo's off, sees the guy and pulls him over for a traffic violation. And says, hey, dude, you got a warrant for your arrest for battery on a household member. Come with me, I'm taking you to jail. And he takes him down, did a great job. I locked him up. But nobody interviewed him. Nobody got a statement, right? And Alonzo comes back from his 3 days off and he's like, oh crap. You rush down to the jail. I'm going to try to get a statement from this guy. Oh, too late. He's already been arraigned. He's got an attorney, and you're done. I don't get to ask him anything, right? We missed that opportunity. Now, in my experience, those offenders, they're not always going to confess, but sometimes they will. And I also guarantee you they will do at least some things that will strengthen your case dramatically. One, they're going to say, yeah, that's my girlfriend, or that's my wife, or my family member. Well, so now we know they fit the description of a household member, which was really important to these charges in New Mexico, right? So yes, he's a household member, he meets the elements. He says, yeah, I lived there. Yes, I have an intimate relationship with her. Yeah, we have kids together. No, I didn't hit her. But he puts himself at the scene. He puts himself in the box for being a household member, that they have an intimate relationship, all of those things that you need to strengthen your case. And you got them on the record, right? And sometimes they'll confess. They may minimize it. Yeah, I was just defending myself. Or, man, you don't know what I got to put up with. She was crazy, out of control. And I just had enough. I couldn't deal with it anymore. All of that stuff, we're going to miss that opportunity if we don't. So we got to work with each other, right? I'm going on my 3 days off. Hey guys, help me out here. If you find him, let's get him interviewed. Or call me, I'll come in on my day off, I'll interview him. Or let's get the investigators to do an interview. But don't miss that opportunity. Identify and list other possible viable charges in the written report. I should give you some examples there. But we want to stack charges on these cases. It helps a lot in plea agreements. Yeah, well, we can drop this one or that one if you'll plead guilty to that one. It really helps in the prosecutorial end of things. Complete the investigation the same day and forward the report to the prosecutor's office as soon as possible. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to make an arrest the same day. Somebody mentioned that they were frustrated with how long I think it was you, about how long it takes sometimes to move these things forward. I guarantee you, once you make an arrest, your case does not get any stronger. It's probably going to get weaker. That's when you're going to see victims start to pull away from the process sometimes. Like, oh, the reality sets in. He's in jail. How am I going to support myself financially? Or he's coercively controlling her from jail and calling her up, or having family members contact her, trying to get her not to participate. So if the victim is in a safe place and the offender's away from her, whatever the dynamics of that are, maybe we don't need to make an arrest right that moment. Let's make sure we've got all of our interviews done. We've interviewed all the witnesses. We've got all of our evidence together and we've submitted it to the prosecutor before we make that arrest. Because once we start that clock ticking, man, everything gets into hyperdrive, right? And the prosecutor, who in Lee County and Eddy County and Roswell and probably many other parts of the state, a minimum of 200 open cases sitting on their desk. They are not going to mince words when it comes to dismissing these cases. If we haven't submitted all the evidence, it's going to get dismissed. Let's don't give them a reason. Get all your facts together before you make that arrest if possible. But that initial report needs to be done right away. I'll tell you, we struggle with this in our agency as well. Our divert touches every domestic violence case that's generated by our patrol division in one way or another. It might be just reading the report, looking for things that might have been missed, but it often involves setting up interviews with Affirming Heart, with victim advocates, getting additional information, and we get reports of an arrest that was made on Friday night, and here it's Monday, and there's nothing there. There's maybe an initial front page with no contact information, no nothing. We've got a supervisor's got to be holding people accountable. You get that initial report done right away, at least with enough basic information that things can be followed up on in a timely manner. We know that injuries don't fully present at the scene, especially bruising. It can be minimal or not even visible initially, but days later you come back and it's enhanced. We've got to do that follow-up. We've got to go back and get those follow-up photographs. 24 to 72 hours for bruises to darken. Swelling can increase. So we want to make sure when we're talking to survivors, documenting their pain. How did that feel? How did that make you feel? Tell me about the pain you're experiencing, and get all it's going to all be recorded. If you're dealing with strangulation cases, this is a whole separate training, but we want to make sure we're looking for petechiae, the little red spots in the eyes, or anywhere else on the body that where the blood flow is restricted, it can occur. Looking for ligature marks, something someone might have been strangled with. Those injuries from those things can be greatly enhanced down the road a day or so later, 3 days later, and it may elevate the charges as well. So it's also doing that follow-up with victims. It's an opportunity for safety planning. Don, do you have a go bag in your police car? What's in your go bag?
So my domestic violence go bag.
No, just for like you're on patrol. What do you have in the trunk of your car in that bag that
Has extra magazines, has first aid kit, has extra tourniquets, has a jacket, has a raincoat.
Yeah. And why do you have all that stuff?
Because it's New Mexico, you never know what you're gonna run into.
That's right. Yeah. How about you? What do you got? I know you got a go bag. What's in your go bag?
Pretty much the same stuff. Yeah, same stuff, honestly.
I got to ask you, do you have a roll of toilet paper in your go bag?
You have white piece.
Wipes. There you go. Oh, why? Because I'm out at mile marker, middle of freaking nowhere, and I got to go. And so, yeah, we got all that stuff, right? And we get trained about that. They train us in that in the academy. Have your stuff together, right? You never know what's going to happen. You might get stuck out there for days. Go looking for a lost hiker. You don't know. It's spur of the moment. But our victims in domestic violence cases often, they need go bags, right? And we can help educate them. I know advocates in this room, you're experts at this because you guys know. You tell them. So I know when I show up on scene, we know statistically it takes about 7 violent incidences before a victim actually gets out of that situation. I don't know which number I'm there on. This is number 1, it might be number 6. She might be somebody that needs 14 before she actually leaves. But when you do leave, what are you going to do? So we can help. Ma'am, I understand you're not ready to go right now. But I want you to know that when you are, I will be here, or somebody from my agency will be here to help you do that safely. But if the shit hits the fan and you can't wait for the police to come help you get out and you got to go, have a plan. Have a go bag. copies of your kids' birth certificates, their shot records, an extra set of car keys, maybe a little bit of extra cash or a credit card or a burner phone that he doesn't know about. Those are things that in the volatile situations that so many of these people are living in, they just don't have the wherewithal to put that all together. So take that opportunity when you go back for that follow-up interview to take those photos. Man, I was here a couple of days ago. Can I take some additional photos of your injuries? The bruising looks a little worse now. Great. Hey, have you considered putting together a go bag? Or she's like closing the door in your face. Nope, don't want to talk to you. You can't take any additional photographs. I want to know that, right? And I'm going to write a supplemental report about that, and I'm going to send it to the prosecutor and say, hey, she's pushing back. We need to be really prepared on this case because she's probably not going to go forward, not going to want to testify. We've got to know that. It helps protect the case when victims disengage. Anybody got an idea what that might be? Bite mark, okay. Are you an expert, Don, on bite marks? No. But can you look at that? Look at that picture and tell me, yeah, through my experience and training, that appears to be a bite mark. We used to have a thing years ago called forensic dentistry, where they thought they could take a bite mark and do an impression of somebody's teeth and tell you whether they actually made that bite mark or not. It's pretty much been debunked. It doesn't happen anymore. I did it on a case. It was a child abuse case. I worked in Albuquerque. A 2-year-old little boy who had been bite marks all over his legs, cigarette burn marks, and we had a boyfriend, girlfriend, mom and dad who were pointing fingers at each other. Took him to this forensic dentist. He made plaster casts of their mouths, and he said, yeah, well, I can tell you for sure she didn't do it, but I can't tell you for sure that he did do it. And then years later, they're like, no, this is all a bunch of BS anyway. You can't prove it unequivocally. But I don't need to be an expert in bite marks to say, yeah, because I'm very likely going to have a victim who's going to tell me, he bit me. That's what happened. He bit me. So I take my initial photograph. I want you to see what this looks like less than 3 days later. But if we don't go back and take that photograph, my gosh, what a powerful piece of evidence in trial. Or maybe we can avoid a trial. We can get a plea agreement now because the defense's attorney's like, oh crap, we don't want the jury to see that. Yeah, it looks really impactful. Okay. So here's my story that I need your help with. Something that in my view, I think I could have done a lot better on. These names are changed to protect the innocent. This is Maria right here, okay? She's a waitress, a server at a Mexican restaurant in Carlsbad. The first time I met Maria, it was in August. I can't remember what year, but it's probably been about 10 years ago. And I'm driving down Old Cavern Highway in Carlsbad. If you've ever been there, there's some residences and then there's long stretches of fields and open areas. And it's 110 freaking degrees. And we all know that if we live in this part of the country, that happens, even hotter. And I see this woman walking down the side of the road against traffic. So she's not hitchhiking, but she's very determined. She's walking somewhere and she's probably 2 miles from the nearest store. And I'm thinking, my gosh, why is she out here? It's so hot. And she's not asking for help. I'm in a marked unit. She doesn't flag me down. So I just keep on going. Next day, I see, again, same thing. She's walking. A couple days after that, I find out why she's walking in 110-degree weather. I get dispatched to her house for a domestic violence call, which was about a mile from where I'd seen her walking. And it's typical, if you will say, that there's really no such thing as a typical DV call. But so she's an immigrant. She has 2 daughters. I think they're like 3 and 4 at the time, or 4 and 5, with her current husband, who is an American citizen. She has a 13-year-old son from a previous relationship with a man in Mexico. And she tells me that she's got some visible injuries where he's hit her. And she starts telling me the story. She's very, very upset. And she says, look, I'm really afraid to talk to you because he tells me if I call the police, he's going to get me deported. I'm like, okay, well, you don't need to worry about that. I'm not from immigration. I'm not going to share any of this with them. You're safe as far as that goes. And she says, well, you know, he lets me buy food for the girls, but he won't let me buy food for my son. His mother stays with us a lot, and she empowers him to do all of this, and she backs him up 100%. And as I said, he's threatened to call the authorities if I tell you what's going on here. The reason I'm walking in 110 degrees weather is he won't let me drive. There's a car in the driveway, but he won't let her drive it. They have 2 vehicles. He won't let me have a cell phone, so I can't call anybody. And I'm thinking, okay, this is cool. So I arrest him for the battery, and I take him to jail, and I don't think much about that case after that. It never goes to trial. I didn't really know. I mean, I had so many calls, so many reports that I'd written, but I thought I did my job. I held him accountable. I arrested him. I offered her resources. I talked about taking him to the battered family shelter, but she said, no, I want to stay here in the home. And I would drive by that house from time to time, and I would see that it was obvious they were still living there. I couldn't see signs of him. I wasn't sure if he was there or not, but I never went back, never did any follow-up. I never went back to take additional photographs, never talked to her again. Until years later, these are all my detectives, right? We walk into this Mexican restaurant in Carlsbad, and it's a buffet kind of thing. And I walk in, and I see this woman, the waitress. We kind of made eye contact as I walked in. I'm like, man, she looks really familiar. And she kind of looks back at me, and that happened a couple more times while we were eating. And we got up to leave to go pay, and she stopped me. All the detectives are standing behind me, kind of in a half circle, and she goes, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Ma'am, yeah, I do, but I can't remember from where. You're so familiar." And she goes, "My name is," she didn't say Maria, she said something else. I didn't click. I didn't. And then she tells me her husband's name. And I'm like, oh, yes, I do remember. And it all came back, how the first time I had seen her and the case and how it all occurred. And she says, I just want you to know, you made a huge difference for me in my life. She said, I got divorced from that guy, and I got all my immigration papers are good. I'm here. I don't have any issues with that. My son is in college, and my daughters are doing great, and I don't have to see my ex-mother-in-law ever again. And she was like, I just want you to know I really appreciate it. And I was like, where's somebody with a video camera? Why isn't this? Oh my gosh. I mean, that's never happened to me in 30 plus years of law. Has that ever kind of thing happened? And it was overwhelming. I mean, I felt really emotional. I thought, my gosh. But I'm sure you listened to my story. There was a lot of things just based on what I've talked about this morning that I could have done that I didn't do. And what I want you all to help me is, from your discipline, if you're an advocate, if you're a SANE, if you're a police officer, whatever your role is, let's talk about this. What could I have done? What could I have done to make that case stronger, or make sure that she got all the help that was available in our community? Okay, take about 2 minutes, talk about it, and then I'm gonna have you guys get back with me, and let's see what you came up with.
Because when Eric's talking, you might go near passing. You just gotta do it. I'll also do store. And so maybe you can either go through that little open hallway, and you go to the store, and kind of wind up in the same place and go. Do what you gotta do.
Here's the story I told you with some bullet points if you need to refresh your memory.
glad we're talking to you.
Give about 1 more minute. Okay. Where's my CYFP people? Child protection considerations. Got a question for you guys. What does living in this environment do to a 4, 5, and a 15-year-old?
I mean, that's emotional abuse, because looking at that, with the 15-year-old, it kind of depends on what he's seeing. He's seeing his mother's not standing up to him. Maybe he's seeing, she's seeing, or he's possibly seeing the physical abuse, and all of the kids are seeing this as a pattern of, my mom took this, maybe this is how I should act, or this is how the type of family I should choose. I deserve this kind of treatment, things like that. There's a lot of factors in there, where the kids witnessing it directly, or are they just seeing the effect of it.
What do you think about the deprivation of the 15-year-old about the food issue? He won't let me buy food for him, only for the does that raise any flags for you?
Then that 15-year-old does not feel that he's important. One, he knows that man does not care about him, and he's not important. It's feel less than, like it doesn't matter what goes on with him. If a whole man that supposedly loves his mother and loves his sisters, but he also may feel like, hey, if I say something, then my sisters might not be taken care of like they should be. So,
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't speak out. There's a whole lot of factors in there.
So based on the limited information I've given you, do you think it's your initial estimate that Maria, do you think she's able to protect all of her children in this situation she's in?
Right now, by herself, without any intervention, we need something. We would want some kind of services in the home, because she's saying she wants to do something for her son, but she just doesn't have the resources right there to do it. And she's telling you, hey, he's not getting fed. I even went to walk and stuff to get stuff. I need some help. So if we introduce services in the home, and if we need to step in further, we have to say we tried everything. So, hey, we presented services. She was able to accept, we feel like these kids are safe, or we presented services, she denied it, steps continue.
So I would submit to you that in my experience, 99% of cases like that, where the police respond to, within the dynamics I just gave you, they're not going to make a referral to CYFP. You would never even find out about this case. It doesn't happen because, well, the kids are fine. They were fed and eat. They're not malnourished. They're not, that's just, it's not a thing. We've got to be making those referrals. Law enforcement, are you an advocate with a gun, or are you in law enforcement? Because you didn't identify yourself.
I live in St.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's all mine. I apologize.
But yes, I'm good.
Okay. Well, thanks for where are you from?
We can.
Okay, great. So for you in law enforcement, How does fear of deportation affect your ability to keep Maria safe?
So she's a victim now, so due to that, she can get it. She's possibly for getting her visa due to being a victim of domestic violence.
Great. What's that visa called?
Can't even remember.
We'll talk more about it.
We were just
I'm glad that
talking
you
to my husband about it, though.
Okay. It's called a U visa, right?
Because we just had a case in Eunice where we actually had to help her. We were talking about how she could get it because she was in a domestic violence situation.
Quick
How is-
question about that.
I'm sorry.
Quick question about
Yes.
that. Is that something that happens really quickly?
No. It's a very slow process. It's a cumbersome process. It can take years, actually. But the key number one thing that you've got to have is a thorough, articulate police report, because that's what they're going to use. And then someone's going to have to authenticate that. In my county, it's me. I'll get a notice from Albuquerque saying, hey, this person is a victim. Can you tell us, yes, is she participating? Is she cooperating in the investigation? And I can authenticate all that. So tell me, if you had this victim saying, look, I'm afraid if I talk to you, I'm going to get deported. How would you deal with that issue? How would you help her work through that?
Well, I've had situations like that. We tell them that everything we do, we don't do with immigration or deportation, that we're there for her safety, and that we'll do everything in our power to help her either try to get her visa or the U visa or whatnot. We just try to educate them that we're not here as immigration or deportation. We're here about the crime that's occurring right there at the moment.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What is important here too is like refer them to the right location for the process for the visa, or talk more about how everything is gonna go, what they need and everything. Because yeah, maybe you can say you might be eligible for a visa, but they're gonna say, okay, so what I have to know.
You got to give them the
I have
resources.
to pay.
Very true.
What if my husband finds out that's what I'm doing?
Well, and they have to move to safe shelter as well.
So in Hobbs, if you had this situation and the officer said, well, I do want to have these children need to be interviewed, how would that happen?
So, is anyone recording? Okay.
That's a fair question, Mark.
So, the way it works at the Hobbs Police Department, is, if the officers are doing a sky referral because there are children in the home, and domestic violence is reported, that is now our standard procedure. Then CYFD will be notified. I get notified because I get the sky referrals that come out of the Hobbs Police Department, and we can then schedule a forensic interview. The officers are instructed, this is where I'm going to put it, they are instructed to do forensic interviews for kids that are present in the home during domestic violence incident. So that is how it is structured to do it, and then myself and CYFD are kind of the backups in case those things don't happen.
The U visa, if you want to scan that, it'll take you right to where you get all the information you need to know about a U visa. It's easy to find online, but it's not an easy process. It does take a significant amount of time, but we can't even start it without a police report. Advocates, victim advocates, real quick, because we're just about out of time. What are the first words you say to Maria to build trust in this moment? If she's come to you, or maybe you even went to the scene, what do you say?
It's the same thing that police should say, I'm here to help.
Okay. Oh, tell me, yes, there we go.
Well, sometimes you have to speak the same language.
Okay.
Because if they do not understand what you say, or they don't speak English, they are not going to.
100% agree with you. I guarantee Maria needed that. She did speak English, but it was limited, and much more impactful coming from someone who speaks Spanish fluently. Yes.
When I talk to clients,
before pulling out any paperwork, any resources, just hearing their story and letting them express themselves and get their emotions out, because sometimes that's
Police officers, you can learn so much from what she just said. Just shut up and listen, right? And let that body cam go, because she's gonna say things that she will never say again. And if you start interrupting her flow of conversation, of her flow of telling her story in whatever form she wants to tell it, you're doing yourself, the whole system a disservice. Let your survivors talk without interrupting. Stop overwhelm that urge that we all want. Everything's got to be in chronological order. Wait, you're getting it out of order here. Go back. What happened first? What happened second? Stop. Let them tell their story. You can go back and put it in chronological order. Right? You can take notes, whatever it is. Go back and you can do that down the road. But don't interrupt that initial narrative. Healthcare is so same. Yes, healthcare. Tell me, Angela, what questions are you asking me to go beyond? I got it real quick. I said, are you safe at home? I'm at the hospital with my wife. I'm in the same room with her, and the nurse comes up and says, are you safe in your own home? I'm like, get my ass out of the room. Why are you asking that question I mean, I don't know. You have an assessment to do, right? You don't need anybody in there. You don't need the husband hovering over the bed or the boyfriend or whoever. No, leave. Tell me what else? What other considerations?
Well, our first priority is their medical well-being, so we're doing that physical assessment first. But there's so many other ways that you can ask about them being safe in their home, without just walking up and asking if they're safe in their home. But priority, like you said, is definitely doing that, having that conversation alone, and asking about other aspects, all of that power and control wheel, all of those patterns, like you're saying, in the coercive control, those things are definitely leading us to the next question and the next assessment.
Excellent. Okay, that's all I have for today. But real quick, any questions, comments?
On the thing about people not interviewing children, I can tell you the state curriculum tells them to interview children at the state.
Oh, yeah.
So I teach it, and I always tell them don't. I just call it the forensic, and I just put it in the state curriculum for them to interview children.
Yeah, the state curriculum is a colossal mess.
And we get 1 day of class for DD.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
From 1 day.
That's one day.
I think I got like 2 minutes. It also, the curriculum also tells you can age date bruises. No, you can't. Doctors don't, that's not a thing anymore. Everybody's bruises develop a little bit differently. I can't look at, oh, that's 3 days old, or that's no. But it's still in there, it's still in the curriculum. Thank you very much for your time, your attention. I'll be here for a while if anybody's got any questions. And I've got business cards too. If you're on LinkedIn, I use that a lot. Please send me a connection request on there. That's all I got.
I do have one question.
Sure.
So as a forensic interviewer, what can I do in my interview with the kids to make your job better?
One, make sure that I'm there to do your interview. So when I see investigatory questions that can help my case, I can give you an opportunity to build those into the conversation.